should start a blooper roll about the you should like 30 seconds of us trying to get this set up.
Yeah.
Well, by us, I mean
You and me. Kids books. Welcome to Good Enough Studios. This is episode number whatever of the Based Marriage Podcast. Today we have my lovely wife here, Mikki Sciba. She is lovely. Look at that giant smile. She can't hardly contain herself. Anyways, she watched my video on the breakup fight, and she has some really good stuff to say. So I said, hey, why don't you come on the show and you can tell us all about it. So just you just watched the video again.
Yeah, to remind myself.
Yes. So tell me, what are your impressions? What stuck out to you? What do you want to talk about the breakup fight?
Well, I mean, two things. One is it's just comical. I mean, just the whole scenario. But it's also sad in a way because there's so much about that argument that I remember to the early days of our marriage where it's sort of the same pattern that I would live out in arguments or disagreements. And I pray I've come a long way since we first have been married. But
Definitely.
It definitely opened my eyes to like, was this a common thing for just us in our, conflict, or is this common? And you said,
Just
no.
us. It's just us.
We're the outliers in relationships.
That's it. We're the only ones who can't figure it out.
And I just, knowing what we know now, it would just have been helpful to have more guidance, that's not the way that it has to be. But I don't know, just looking at it, it was just kind of funny.
What things do you think would have been helpful?
Well, one is like sort of the way that it started. She had said like she was going to do the dishes and she would like his help. And he was like, okay, well, I'm going to play video games. And so I think one of the things that would have been helpful to me is to not make my desire, what I wanted to be done, something that was placed as a superior to what he wanted to do.
Tell me about that. What do you mean?
He wanted to play video games. And I guess some people could make the point that objectively cleaning dishes is maybe better than playing video games. I don't know. I don't know if you would have anything to say about that.
Well,
but I think just in that moment, like they had just gotten home and that's what he wanted to do for like the next 15 minutes. And in her mind, or at least the way it came across, is that her desire for that moment trumped his because she thought her objective was more important than him playing video games. And I wish I would have known that it's okay to have a balance there, that even if I think objectively speaking, cleaning the house is better than playing video games, that doesn't necessarily mean that in that moment, what he's doing and what she's doing, that they have to trump each other.
Yeah. How so? So, because if she doesn't do the dishes, if they don't do the dishes that night, then his video games trumped her dishes. Dive into that a little bit. What do you mean about this balance? What's this balance?
Well, just sort of the understanding that we don't always have to do everything as a team. And she does say this later on, like, it would be nice. It would be nice if.
Sure.
Well, sure. I'm sure her husband would be like, it would be nice if she greeted me at the door every day. I came home from work and gave me a big kiss and was wearing something that was, really flattering for her. And she did her makeup for me. Like, it would be nice. Sure, it'd be nice.
Flattering.
And so I think when women, or at least I'll speak for myself, when I said it would be nice, it was sort of like, I want him to do this. So I'm just kind of going to control or do my best to control the situation to get this thing. And it didn't really matter if you wanted to do something at that time that was different than what I wanted to do. And it was almost this thing like, sure, would it be nice if you wanted to do what I wanted to do all the time? Would it be nice if you wanted to do what I wanted to do all the time? Sure, I guess that would be nice, absolutely. But we don't have to do everything together. And if it's a preference of mine that I want to have the dishes done before I go to bed, which is actually personally not necessarily a priority of mine. I think you prefer the dishes to be done more than I do at night. But that what I want to happen in this moment doesn't have to trump yours, and we don't even have to do it together. To just sort of be more accepting of that. You know, as much as I would want you to see my need at that moment for you to be helpful to get this thing done, there's another side of the coin where she also needs to see what he needs. Like he just said, just 15 minutes. He literally said 15 minutes. I just want to rest my feet for a minute. And so for her to be like, you know what? He deserves to be able to rest his feet for 15 minutes. And I'm just going to have to suck it up. And even if I'm upset about it, allow him to have his space, his time, his whatever he needs to do at the end of the day to just unwind. But if I say I can't unwind until these things are done, so we need to do this so that we can both unwind, I just think that's unfair and not necessarily the way that it should go, even though it might be nice if those things are done and then they can just unwind in their separate ways.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be the case. The husband does not have to desire what the wife desires. And for her to expect that, I think, is placing an unfair expectation on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does she do then? Because it doesn't sound like doing the dishes helped her unwind. It sounded more like that the dishes were finished, that she had a clean kitchen and clean dining room, that was the place that she really wanted to be. So that doing the dishes wasn't the unwind. So what does she do in that spot? I mean, what would you have her do or counsel her to do if she were in that spot where he was going to go ahead and play video games and she's going, doing the dishes is actually going to cause me stress, but having a dirty kitchen when I wake up in the morning is going to cause me stress too. What would you recommend that she would do in that situation?
So I tell our kids all the time, life is about choices. Life is about choices. So she has a choice to make. She can either just graciously accept, like, you know what, this is what I want. This is what I want because it makes me feel better about the state of our house or when I wake up in the morning. So this is a choice that I'm going to make, and I individually am going to accept the consequences of my choice. So if it's to do the dishes, then to not be mad that she's doing the dishes because it's what she wants to get done. And if she decides to wait until the next morning, to not be all flustered in the morning when there's dishes in the sink, because that was a choice that she made. So realizing that she still has a choice in the matter. And she could have said, you know what, yeah, sure, 15 minutes sounds great. And then she could have done something that she wanted to do for 15 minutes, her skincare routine, you know, at night, or brushing her teeth, or brushing her hair, or reading a book, or painting her nails, whatever. Like, there's a million other things that she could have done, I'm sure, that she enjoys that are calming to her for those 15 minutes. But I think that at the core of all of this, because what's funny is that it starts it's not funny, it's actually quite sad, but it starts with the dishes. And then it goes to the lemons. And then from the lemons, it goes to, the flowers. And then from the flowers to the ballet. So it's almost this ripple effect. So it really has nothing to do with those things. There's something far greater there. And I think, this is something I talked to you about the other day.
Sure.
I think that for women or for wives, sort of, I guess in this situation, the desire to be seen and understood is so great. And there may be these specific moments in her life, like a moment with the dishes, a moment with the lemons, a moment with the ballet, a moment with the flowers, that all of these things, there's something in that where she has not felt understood or seen, even if it was small. Mm-hmm. And so it all accumulates. And so in this moment, when she doesn't, I would say she doesn't feel like she is seen or understood, like why this is so important to her to do the dishes like right now.
Yeah.
So when he postpones, I think in the sort of desperation, she's like, I'm not seen, I'm not understood. He doesn't understand how important this is to me. And so then it's so then it just becomes this laundry list of things where she has felt not understood or not seen, which I don't think is fair to the man. But I think that women will then chase that down. Like, I think near the end of the scene that you commented on, like their argument is, you think over. And so he walks out of the room and she like pursues him,
She's like,
and
no,
she doesn't stop.
That's not it.
Yeah.
Like, she kind of gives up, but then she turns around and re-engages.
Right. And I think sort of in that moment, there's this like desperation, this deep desire, like, but see me, see me, see me. And so she will chase him down and try to do everything in her power to be seen and understood. And I think this is where maybe a lot of wives fail, especially Christian wives, because the only person who can really understand and see us as we are is our Lord. And when we try to project that onto our husbands to really be seen and to really be understood, we're chasing, I think, a dream that can never come to fruition in the way that we desire, but we try. And that's I think where the desperation comes, because she'll continue to speak and she'll continue to talk and she'll continue to get angry, or she'll continue to interfere, or I would say probably any of the maybe bad habits that you come across in counseling couples or whatever, or offering guidance to that, is that some of it is just in her desperation, like, I want to be seen, I want to be understood. And so it's this grasping at something that I actually do not think is hers for the taking. I don't think the husband can actually do that, even if he's top notch and super great.
Whoa.
She just has to accept that there is always going to be a part of her that he just won't see the way she wants it to be seen.
Yeah.
And it won't be understood the way she wants it to be understood. And so instead of flying to and trusting in the faith of our Lord, there seems to be a grasping of that from our husbands. And I think that is unfair.
You mean grasping at your husband, trying to get what you should actually be getting from Jesus?
Absolutely. See, I mean, this is why she pursues him. Like, see me, see me.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, I think it boils down to she doesn't believe that he sees what's important to her. And why it's important to her. She really likes the ballet. And he's like, why would I want to go to the ballet? And she's like, it's not about the ballet. It's about being with the person who loves the ballet, right?
Yeah.
So it all boils down, I think in my estimation, it all boils down to her wanting to be really seen and understood, not mocked for what she wants. Just like, this is what I enjoy because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't see that, she will try to, like, in a sense, like, force the matter. Like, what can I do to get him to see this?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that there's a lot of bad behavior that can result in her trying to force him to see, to understand. And there just has to be an acceptance that he can be the most magnificent husband, but there's still going to be an element that you're not going to be understood completely the way that you want, and you're not going to be seen completely in the way that you want.
Yeah.
And there's a surrender that has to happen, I believe, on the wife's end. So,
what is that like?
Painful.
Yeah.
Painful and freeing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So painful and freeing, I think, because, when we grow up, we see Disney movies and it's always like the prince comes and saves the princess or fulfills these things and happily ever after. And I think that there is an element of a woman thinking she deserves a certain lifestyle. And I think she even says it in the clip, like, I deserve better than this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like right at the end before she walks out.
Yeah.
I deserve better than this. Yeah.
So I think that there is this, I'll just speak for myself. I think
Sure.
in my understanding of relationships that we were both faithful Christian people, and I thought that we would not have the struggles that we were going to have. And now looking back on it, I think that I was expecting the sort of like a Disney ending, in the sense of like, oh, well, you agree on this thing, you get married and you have the same mission, and then everything should be a piece of cake and everything should be easy. And it's not, because there's still surrender that has to happen in moments of our life. So if we're not used to that, then when we have to, in a sense, surrender those things that are deepest to us, like that desire to be seen and that desire to be understood, when there's an element of that surrender, it is painful, because I think people want validation.
Sure.
I think
That was the first thing that happened to Eve when she was created. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. That was pre-fall experience.
yeah, absolutely. And so
She got validation right after. And Adam ruined it for all of us.
yeah, and I think we desire that, like I just think to be validated and to be seen truly as we are. But in our fallen world, in our fallen state, the only way we can be seen that way, truly as we are, is through the eyes of our Savior. And any other pursuit we make in gaining that in this world from worldly people will always fall short.
Are you calling me worldly?
Yes, because you, in the sense of like, we are also of this world,
Temporal.
right?
We live in
Right.
the world. We're not superhuman or supernatural.
Right. That's what I mean.
I'm not God. I sometimes think I am, but I'm not God.
Yeah. And so I think that this, I think the acceptance of, oh, what I thought marriage was going to be, like this person who is going to respect me and my desires and my opinions all the time, or this person who is going to support me in this thing at all times. When that realization comes, and also the realization that my behavior and my choices are also not that great. And you have to come to terms with your own weakness and ugliness. And that part is painful. Nobody likes to be reprimanded for poor behavior. I don't know. I've never come across anybody who likes to have their shortcomings called out.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Can I have another?
Right? And so in marriage, that is a place where our own selfishness, I think, is magnified.
Yeah.
So when we are willing to embrace that I have faults, and sometimes major ones that have contributed to conflict, and that need to change, like coming face to face with those truths is the painful part. And coming to a realization that your spouse is not your fixer. They can't fix all these things. Yeah. That's painful. And to think like, oh, well, I'm carrying this cross. And so when you think, when you marry your spouse, that they will help you carry your cross, and the realization that, they have their cross to carry too. So I've got to pull my weight. I've got to carry some baggage. Yeah. And I've got to work through it. That is hard. So I think just embracing that it's hard and that we have to carry our own weight, and we can't expect our spouse to fix it. That there's a part of personal growth that we just have to go through the pain to realize that. So that's hard, but it's also freeing, because you grow in virtue and you are becoming more of the person that God has called you to be when you learn to carry your cross gracefully, when you learn to grow in virtue, when you embrace your weaknesses, recognize the ugliness that has happened in your soul or that continues to happen, and you decide that you are going to work with the grace of God to overcome those things, that it's freeing to live in the grace of God to be better for His sake. And then when you do that, you're absolutely better for your spouse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a lot.
Sorry.
And that was really fantastic. It was really great. So something about people today, and this is not a knock, this is just an observation, is that they really need the practical. We have this giant knowledge gap in society right now where principles and ideas in general are talked about, but the real practical steps are not given. I mean, spoon feeding, a lot of people dump on the idea of spoon feeding. Well, I'm not going to spoon feed you. A lot of people dump on that, but that is really and truly what a lot of people need. So when you talked about really embracing being corrected or embracing being confronted with those things, practically speaking, how does that work? What is that like? What's that experience like? How did you do it? How would you recommend somebody else do those things?
Well, a lot of it was from your help and your guidance.
Help. That's a very charitable way to put it. Help. Help. Like I'm walking with you, holding your hand, saying, "Just do it like this." Well, what did that look like?
I think that there were just a few times when you said, "Nope, not gonna." You didn't say these words, but not gonna accept excuses for this behavior.
Yeah.
So what role do you have to play in XYZ?
Yeah.
And in a sense, not that you detach from me, but you gave me the space to work it out.
How so? Tell me what that means.
You would say, nope, not gonna, you can't speak to me that way, or you can't stop trying to make excuses. Like, what is it about your behavior that needs to change?
Yeah.
And I think I would in the past be like, well, you made me feel this way, right? So it was the
Right.
blame game. Like, I'm going to blame you. Like, I wouldn't have acted this way because I wouldn't have felt this way if you hadn't done
XYZ, yeah.
And so then learning okay, there are probably things that people in our relationships do that can cause some anger or some strong emotions.
Sure.
But we are still in full control of how we handle those emotions. And I was a terrible handler of strong emotions.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I didn't know what to do with it. No one spoon fed me about what I do to process sort of strong anger or grief or I don't know, whatever strong emotions you can think of. Like how to really process that in a productive way that is healthy for a relationship. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to do that. I was a principles girl. I knew the principle, right? Sort of the goal. I had no idea how to get there.
So do you mind if I ask you, how did you handle those strong emotions before?
Oh man, I would raise my voice. I would use sarcasm. I'd roll my eyes. Blame you for the state of whatever the conflict was about. Yell. I was nasty.
You're nasty.
It was not. I would cry a lot. I would like if we had an argument and you're like, yeah, I'm done, and you walked out, I would follow you, be like, we are not done.
Yeah.
I'm not done, and because I'm not done, we're not done.
Yeah.
And so, because I didn't know how to do that. I did not know how to sit in very strong emotions that were uncomfortable. I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know how, productive ways to process those things. And I allowed them to come out in ways that are just damaging. I would probably say the biggest is sarcasm and blame.
Yeah.
And resentment. And then all that stuff just builds up and builds up. And so when you hang on to that and that resentment starts to creep in, man, that's hard stuff right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how practically, what thought processes, what things did you tell yourself? What did you pray? How did you make that switch from when essentially put my foot down and said, I'm not taking the sarcasm anymore. What specifically are you doing to change your behavior? How is your behavior problematic? When I was saying those things, and so didn't give you the room to act in that way anymore or express your emotions in those ways, what did you do? How did you talk to yourself? What did you tell yourself? What shifted? What active things did you do or did occur inside of your head, inside of your soul, in order to actually end up embracing that change? What did you do? Spoon feed the audience how you did this. Spoon feed me. How did you do this?
Sure. So for me, I think it was a process. So it wasn't overnight. It was a matter of first realizing like, oh, I'm having these strong emotions and I can't act out in this way that I have before. So I would go on long drives. I would roll the windows down and listen to Christian music because I just didn't know what to do.
It was the most peaceful, quiet silence ever.
Yeah, so there was like, I'm still feeling this strong emotion. And so I was like, well, if I can't act a certain way in the home, I need to get out of the home because I don't know what to do. So the first step for me was just to exit the situation where I knew that if I stayed, that I did not have the self-control to keep myself from even rolling the eyes or like walking past you in a passive aggressive way. Like, if we pass each other in the kitchen, I'm like, I'm not even going to rub shoulders with you because we're passing through this space, And so I had to just exit. I had to just have a moment to let those strong emotions be there and then just calm. So I'd say that was the first step. And then
what did you do on these drives? What did you tell yourself something? Did you pray the rosary? Were you listening to Jesus, My Boyfriend music?
Yeah.
What?
So it's so funny. I always roll the window down because there's something about rolling the windows down in the car that makes me feel like there's some element of freedom.
Oh yeah.
I actually don't know why. I don't know why. So I would roll the windows down and then I would turn on Christian music, and most of the time I would cry the first half of my drive. Mm-hmm. And the second half was just like, just coming down off of that emotional high, even though it was a negative high, but coming off that emotional like roller coaster, just coming down and being at a space where I could just breathe. Because when I would come home,
it wasn't like an emotional high, like elation.
No,
it was. You mean by emotional high, you mean really intense emotions that needed to come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then realizing too that when I came home, because this is another thing that I sort of had to work through, when I would come home after having those strong emotions, like intense, I would say intense, like I could tell that my heart was beating fast and that I felt tightness in my chest because I didn't know what to do with all of that. And so when I would come home, I would still experience that like tightness because like, okay, well, I don't think this thing is resolved. I'm still having some sort of emotion about XYZ. And so just sort of preparing myself, like I would tell myself, okay, this is the things that you're not going to do. You're not going to roll your eyes. You're not going to call him a name. So those negative behaviors that I probably exhibited before, I had to weed those out. And that wasn't easy because it just got into a habit of, like sarcasm or like whatever, or dismissive or being passive aggressive, like those things I had to learn to just not do.
Yeah.
I don't really know if I have like a secret to that. It was just like, okay.
You just tell yourself you're not going to do this when you go inside. And then all you had to do was avoid those behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then it was like, get away. When I come back, here are certain things I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
And then later it became like, okay, if this is an issue that needs to be addressed, I think sometimes I would email you because I was like, I don't know if we can do this in person. And so I was like,
Sure.
I'm feeling this. I'd like to talk to you later. Can we schedule a time or whatever?
Yeah.
Because I had to be able to remove emotion from it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I would text or send an email because I was like, okay, I need to be not emotional about this thing. And say like, oh, I think we need to talk about it, or I would like to talk about it. And sometimes we did, and sometimes we didn't. And I think, I guess, long story short, it just came down to an acceptance of this is what God is asking of me in this relationship. So if I asked to speak about something and you said yes, then great. That I needed to keep my composure and act as a Christian wife should act, calm and gentle and receptive, which is, I think, hard to do.
Did you feel, in the moments when you said, I need to be calm and gentle and receptive, did you feel calm, gentle, and receptive?
No, sometimes I didn't.
So you acted contrary to how you felt.
Oh, for sure. Which again was not my practice in, growing up.
Yeah.
So I wasn't like trained in a way to act contrary to what I felt. That if I felt angry, people would know that I was angry. If I felt sad, people would know that I was sad. If I was scared, people would know that I was scared. I don't think I really grew up knowing how to be angry inside, but not show that anger in some way.
Well, what would be your answer if somebody told you that you were being inauthentic, or you're not being your true self, you're just stuffing down your true self by acting differently than you feel? What would be your answer to somebody who says something like that?
Well, I would say my true self is a Christian woman who tries to please the Lord. And so part of my existence as a person is to have a will, reason, and my emotions. And so, which I should submit all of those to God. And so if I'm feeling a certain way, I have come to learn to submit that to God first. Well, I'm still learning. Like there's some things, but really learning to, okay, God, you have these. These are yours. They're my emotions, but I'm asking for your guidance in these. I'm laying this down at your feet. Just like if there was a certain trial in my life and I'm like, Lord, I lay this down at your feet. Do with it. Teach me in this. What are you trying to teach me? How am I trying to grow? Like, help me with this situation. Then I've tried to do the same with my emotions.
Yeah.
And so I would say that even if I still feel a certain way, but I'm not acting on it, I would never say that that's me not being authentic, because my authentic self is a Christian woman. And so in that authenticity of being a Christian woman, then I would take what I was feeling and present it to God. And I would really ask him, I was like, is there an element to what I'm feeling based in truth? Is there actually something about this relationship or this argument that goes past just kind of being angry in the moment, you know, or something that needs to be addressed? And I've learned to discern much more about whether or not I should bring something up to you.
Yeah. And
most of the time, if I sleep on it, I feel much better the next morning. I'm like, okay, that was kind of silly.
So what is your discernment process to decide whether or not it needs to be addressed, or whether or not you need to bring it up to me? How do you figure that out?
So I have for those who are not super familiar with Catholicism, I have a deep devotion to the Sacred Heart of our Lord. And you've got me this necklace that I love. And, because like in the heart of our Lord, he experienced trial and pain. Like he said, Lord, if this cup can pass by, let it be, please let that happen, but your will be done. So for me, it's sort of just imitating imitating those words. Okay, Lord, this is what I'm feeling. If you can take these feelings from me, great. If you can help me or offer guidance in this situation, great. If I just need to sit in it for a minute, great. And so I don't really know if I have a step-by-step process, but just bringing that to the Sacred Heart. And I'll just say, like, Sacred Heart, make my heart like yours. And just purify my heart, because there's things in my heart that are not pure. There's things in my heart that are not completely holy and completely virtuous and completely perfect. And to think that I am would be false. And so just leaning into that. So that has been a devotion that really has transformed the way that I discern.
Yeah.
So just I say a prayer to the Sacred Heart that I love, and sometimes when it just feels really heavy, this is gonna sound a bit juvenile, maybe, but I just picture, like in the bottom of the heart, it just looks like a little,
like a cup or a basin.
Yeah.
Or something.
And so sometimes I just picture myself just laying in that.
Yeah.
And just, the Lord already knows. He already understands. I don't have to retell the story to him, but I can if I feel like it. And just sit in there. And I think just being in the presence of that even shows me whether or not what I'm experiencing is in alignment with first the teachings of Christ, virtue, what he wants from me, And so sometimes most of the time when I think about that, I'm like, okay, kind of got a little upset about something small. Or actually, I think this is kind of a big deal. So you need to pray about when to bring it up, when the best time to bring it up. So it's all just been a process.
So you would say that there's probably a lot of things that you go through the emotions of them, but you don't ever bring them up.
Yeah.
Just a lot of things that you just let go. They're not worth bringing up. You find that they're not as big a deal later as they were in that particular moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even going back to what we talked about earlier, that you won't, not be you, but any person may not be able to see and understand the depth of that emotion the way that I would want them to.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, well, why bring it up? If I'm trying to force them to understand really what I'm feeling, I can't actually do that. And so just realizing okay, that's for Jesus. The intensity of that and the gravity of that emotion, that's for Jesus because he gets it.
Yeah.
And then just being okay with that. And I think that when I'm upset.
I do.
Or if I'm experiencing strong emotions, and there have been times where I've had some strong emotions, and I think that you have sensed that they're strong emotions, and maybe 2 or 3 or 4 days later, I'll be like, okay, I was just having strong emotions. This is why. And just to kind of let you know where I am. But sometimes it even takes me a minute to process, why am I acting this way? Why do I feel flustered or angry? And sometimes it even, I can feel that, but I'm like, why is that making me so mad?
Yeah.
So then having to just have the time to work through it. So I don't know.
And you find sometimes that these things go away on their own?
Yeah. Yeah.
How frequently would you think?
Oh man. Probably often, because I'm a highly emotional person.
Yeah.
I feel things very strongly. And so, so I would say there's a lot of times where the intensity just, it's kind of like a flame. When you first ignite the match, it's like, phew, and then after a while it just burns and then it's done.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just what I need to do.
Okay.
And I would say that happens often because
I noticed that.
The intensity of it's so intense. Sometimes I don't even know what to do with it. And so I'm still learning more productive ways to sort of handle those, moments of hot intensity when the spark flies, inside. But I have found for me, a lot of times it just kind of tends to die down.
Yeah.
And then if there's a persistent, like, oh, I think this is an issue in our relationship that needs to be addressed, I've just always bring it to prayer first.
Yeah.
And then, but then a lot of times I also think, okay, the Lord knows what he's doing with Matt, and he knows what he's doing with me. And so sometimes, or I guess in recent years, I become more accepting of, those things will work themselves out instead of trying to force it.
Yeah.
And so that's been helpful to me. Yeah, I guess in things that I feel like emotional about.
Yeah.
But
wow. That was fantastic. That
Well,
was really good. That was
Thanks.
really good. You went deeper than I expected that you would go, which is great. Because I know this is we went through what would you call it? A sensitive experience in a restructuring of the emotional dynamics of our marriage in order to give it a really ridiculously technical sounding name. And, airing this out to the entire world is a really vulnerable thing. I mean, you're going to catch a lot of hell on
probably
YouTube and,
I just
and
won't
X
read
and all the
comments.
rest because you are the epitome of everything that the feminists hate, and they're going to try and nitpick all of the videos to figure out that you're actually being forced into saying this. I gave you all this and it was rehearsed, and oh my gosh, look how oppressed she looks with this giant smile that looks like your face is going to explode from smiling so big. This is the picture of oppression right here. So thanks for going deep, really deep,
For
on
sure.
your personal experience, and even sharing some of the mistakes that you were making and what that was like, and what, at least some steps, spoon feeding, of how you coped on the inside. St. Thomas Aquinas talks about that the males are the active principle. So they're the ones that take the action, especially in reproduction, and that and also with regard to authority, not just saying I have authority, but the invisible but inherent authority that a man has. It's invisible, it's intangible, but it is almost like a spiritual aura and power that he already possesses. Even if he sucks at implementing it, he still possesses it, and everyone in the home knows it, and they know that if he's doing it badly, they recognize that, and that is still a testament to that he has that authority, that when he's doing it badly, everyone still notices, oh, he's doing this badly. You've given the passive principle side, the one who is being acted upon. So you talked about essentially what it was like when I acted upon you and said, it's not okay for you to talk to me this way. I'll talk with you another day when you're calm. So we've heard about that. Are you interested in continuing this conversation right now and talking about what it was like, or me explaining to you what it was like being the active principal for
I didn't like it at
for
first.
the risk of, I didn't like it either.
It was
Holy
so
smokes.
hard. Yeah, no, it was tough. It was super tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my initial response in those things is to become defensive.
Yeah.
And in years of just trying to figure out why that's the case, I know why that's the case. Like, it's just an act of like self-preservation. But I think when we become that way with our spouse, we are in dangerous territory.
Yeah.
And by dangerous territory, I mean, like, you shouldn't have to preserve yourself from your spouse. So if you're already in a position,
So that's an interesting way to put it. You shouldn't have to. Was there something going on that you felt, or that you felt you were legitimately in danger, that you felt like you needed protecting?
no, like, there was no physical danger. There was just trying to figure out, maybe like an example would be like, if you're like, you can't talk to me that way. Like, my initial thing was like, but you can't talk to me that way.
Yeah.
Like, do you know, like that defense, like I have to preserve a self of like, that I'm not the only guilty one, or I'm not the only I'm not taking full responsibility for this. And even though you weren't asking me to, there was this perception that I had
Yeah.
that, oh, no, but wait, this goes both ways. And so in order to like, I guess, preserve a little bit of my pride, which was not good, or not willing to accept, like, you know what? It doesn't matter what he said or how he said it. I'm responsible for my actions. And so if he's like, you can't talk to me that way, then I need to be at a place where I should say, you know what? I was sarcastic and I shouldn't have. It doesn't matter if you were sarcastic to me. And I know this will probably be unpopular. I get that.
That's all right.
But
the only person that matters is not going to judge you.
But yeah, just recognizing like, okay, but I could have reacted differently. I'm the only person that I can control. You know, like the outcomes of my behavior. And so when if I just said, if you're like, you can't talk to me that way, if I just responded, well, you can't talk to me that way, you know, then it just like we're up wanting each other and no one's actually being heard or willing to change.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you have said for quite some time,
oh boy,
is to have, no, this is good, is to have a like a gentle and tranquil spirit.
I didn't come up with that.
It was in scripture. And so I was like, fine, I will test this out.
Yeah.
And I really have tried to become more gentle and tranquil and docile. And I would say that when I have learned those things, I have become a more free woman in the sense of like living out a life that I believe God wants me to. And it has been incredibly beneficial to our marriage.
Yeah, how so?
I'm able to let go of a lot of things in the sense of like my responsibility is to be gentle and docile and tranquil. Like those are beautiful things. There's nothing oppressive about that. There's nothing negative about those things, even though some people may say that is. It's a beautiful thing to live out those virtues. And when I do that, I'm happier. My kids are happier. You're happier. Because
I'm way happier.
That's just it just boils down to that's what living a life in virtue does. It frees you for a life in excellence. Oh, for sure.
You seem way happier.
Because I'm not trying to control your behavior.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. I'm not trying to reach or force things out of you that I expect or that I want. Like the things that you choose to bring to the relationship, which are good, but they should be your choice. Like for that to be forced and not genuine, I don't actually like that. I don't. That's not something.
You want me to want to do the dishes?
It would be nice. But no, there's something very freeing about the choices, the actions that you choose to take are from a place of authentic to desire to be a virtuous spouse, regardless of what your spouse is like.
Yeah. So the standard being more an internal standard that you are trying to live up to, rather than what a lot of people believe, well, he's not keeping up his end of the bargain, so I don't have to keep up mine, and I will live a life of virtue after he lives a life of virtue, or I will live a life of virtue after she starts living her life of virtue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like your wedding vows are contingent on the other person living their wedding vows first.
Yeah. There was one point.
So that's what you're saying. Don't do that. You went for a standard of virtue regardless of my behavior.
Yeah. Like there's a certain kind of woman that I want to be. Mm-hmm. And combative, argumentative, rebellious is not it.
Yeah.
Gentle, tranquil, docile, joyful, patient. Those are the things I'm striving for. I don't live them perfectly by any stretch of the means, but it's what I want to aspire to do. And I think that there was for a long time and throughout our marriage, there was a focus that I had on like, it would be nice if he was this kind of spouse. It would be nice. This is what I would like. It would be really nice. And then at one point, God was like, but are you being the kind of wife that he needs? Like I was really focused on what I thought I needed in a spouse. Like, what do I need? I'm not getting what I need, whatever. And then I felt God speaking to me like, but are you the wife that he needs? Are you being the wife that he needs? And so then my shift, like the way that I thought it changed, the way my thinking shifted.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yes, I could probably list all these things that would be nice. Like margaritas and queso every night would be awesome, right? That would be nice,
you'd be like
right?
300 pounds in a week.
That would be nice. Or like there's so many things that would be nice, but
look, I'm 6'2" and I make six figures. I mean, that's the top 5% of men in the United States, and I'm white, so like that's checking 3 boxes. There are women out there dying for men like me.
No, I know I won
chips
your
and queso
heart,
and
I want chips
margaritas
and
every
queso.
night? Oh my
I guess
goodness.
that was just a
Too
silly
much.
example.
That's it.
That was just
We're
a silly
done.
example of that. We can always find something else that would be nice. That we can always find something
sure.
else that we want our spouse to do for us.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
the kind of person we think our spouse needs to be. Like, this is what I need from my spouse to be happy or joyful or whatever.
So what you're saying
Instead
is
of
6'2" and 6 figures to only go so far.
Oh no, I'm totally happy. I'm just saying a margarita in case
it really does only go. It really does only
But-
go so far, because if you don't have virtue, like what's the point?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
You can call yourself a top G, but it's extraordinarily worldly to limit that to height, which is something you absolutely can't control, and money, which is something you can, but you're going to die and leave it all here anyways.
Yeah.
And it really is not. There are wealthy people who are very virtuous and wealthy people who are the scum of the earth, and so it doesn't seem that money actually helps you to grow in virtue. So you're saying, and I completely agree with you, that the pursuit of virtue is absolutely priceless by comparison.
Sure.
Yeah.
And my pursuit of virtue needs to be centered on what God is calling me to be and the kind of wife that I am called to be for you.
Yeah.
Not what is a virtuous spouse I need to do X, Y, Z. Like for me, that shift changed so much in me. Like, what kind of wife is God calling me? What kind of wife does he need? What kind of wife does my husband need? Because you are out there, you're working, you're doing hard work. The emotional toll is great. You hear about trauma all day. And so...
Yeah, like this is my 10th hour of conversation about relationships and trauma and emotions. Yeah, just today.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. Just to really make it simple for the people at home who might not know, because at least my observation is a lot of people hear the word virtue, but they don't really specifically know what that means. In your particular case, when you talked about trying to grow in virtue, what is virtue? What are virtues? What is this that you're trying to grow in?
A good spiritual habit of the soul, like
Okay,
having
you're
a
gonna need
disposition.
Even more simple than that.
You know, clarity and brevity are not gifts of mine yet. So,
well, it's about time, because I need you to answer this question.
Simpler than a
What virtues? What specific virtues are you?
Oh,
I think people
specific
would be able to understand that. What specific virtues were you trying to grow in? In which you were trying to
gentleness and docility. I think docility is huge.
What is docility?
The ability to be taught, the openness to being taught.
Coachable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that means that you're open to hearing some critique about things that need to change. Like sports people do this all the time when their coaches are like, oh, you need to change your stance or whatever. For them to say like, well, you need to change your coaching. Like that's not helpful or beneficial, but that happens in marriage all the time, right?
Yeah.
If a spouse like, I think that you should speak a little softer and like, well, I think that you should, whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work in any other sort of coachable relationship or like a boss to an employee, a coach to a player,
Sure.
And so, the humility, to be coachable and to accept that, there are some things within my soul that are not where they need to be. And I need to be able to accept my weakness in that and work towards being better. Because at the end of the day, I answer to the Lord, and he's going to say, I want him to be able to look at me and say, good and faithful servant.
Yeah.
And for me in my state in life was I a good and faithful wife? Was I a good and faithful mother? Because those are my primary roles right now. And regardless of your behavior towards me, which is not, it's not bad. It's beautiful, and you're a wonderful husband, and I'm so grateful. I don't want to get emotional right now, but I'm so grateful for you. And I'm happy that we are where we are.
Yeah.
But it took coaching, and it took me a long time to be docile, and coachable in those things. But I'm so happy. I'm so happy that you were able to stand up for what you knew was good and true, and that I was open to God's will and to God's will through you. Just took a hot minute.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah. My experience, so I had the opposite in experience. You were the one being acted upon, and I was the one having to do the acting. But I have an observation that it seems that most, if not all, women have a tendency to avoid accountability, just as the natural state of things. I work with a lot of people. Now, granted, this is not a representative sample of the population. My sample is people who are in so much pain, they come looking specifically for me to fix their problem. So that's not a random sample, a representative sample of society. But I try to pay attention to how things are going with people on social media, my interactions with others. It seems that at least an extraordinarily large population of women do not naturally look at themselves and say, what do I need to change in order to make this situation better? They generally look to others and say, what can that other person do to make this situation better? Or what are they not doing that's causing me grief? Mm-hmm. And that generally, except for like men who never actually matured into adulthood, they still are in this infantile narcissism sort of state. Generally, men are going to look at a situation and go, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix it. And they kind of put it on their own shoulders to fix it, even when they're awful at it, even when they keep trying the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and it doesn't work. Like, they can be miserable at solving the problem, but they still put on their shoulders, it's my job to figure out how to fix this problem. And it's my observation that the wives are not saying that. They're just saying, I'm dissatisfied with the job he's doing. Mm-hmm. So that was my experience, was I need to figure out how to fix this problem. And I never really considered, it never really entered my mind that fixing our relationship was your problem and something you needed to take the initiative on. I had in my mind that you needed to look at your behavior and fix it, but that was not self-evident that was occurring. So what it boiled down to was, when we got married, you had a poor set of skills. I had a poor set of skills. You didn't know what you were feeling. I didn't know what I was feeling. We both happen to be highly emotionally sensitive people.
Perfect recipe.
We experience our emotions ridiculously high even if we don't necessarily show it, we have them. There, I would say that I am more emotionally sensitive. If you were to split men into two categories of more emotionally sensitive, less emotionally sensitive, I would say I am more emotionally sensitive. That's in one way evident based on appreciation and interest in art and music, things like that. Those are much more emotional pursuits than things like engineering. So it was, at least in my mind, it was my job to fix it. And what did I read? What did I listen to? The earliest I can think of was there was one book, I can't even remember the title of it, but the author said, or he wrote in it, men, you have to get your homes in order. If your wife is talking to you with disrespect, why is she talking to you like this? She would never talk to her boss like this. Why is she talking to you like this? And I went, I'm just going to say that. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to hit her with that and just say, it's not okay for you to talk to me that way. You would never talk to your boss that way. Why do you think it's okay to talk to me that way? And it kind of worked. You like stopped and went, and didn't really have an answer to that.
Yeah.
And I went, hang on, wait, something shifted. But I kept what eventually I figured out. I saw somebody had called it a sanity journal. And I just kept a journal of, here are all the different fights here. And it wasn't like I was collecting firewood in order to fight back later. It was just so I could, for one, dump it all out somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then for two, because there were times in our fights that you would recall previous fights, like in this breakup thing where she's like, you only brought 3 lemons, and then you didn't flowers, and then the ballet, and then all the other things. And I would sit there and go, wait a minute, how does she remember this stuff with unbelievable clarity? And I can't even remember what I had for lunch today. How does she remember these fights from like 7 years ago? And then I just started writing them down so that I could go back and go, okay, that's not how it went. Okay, I'm not crazy. She has a lot of confidence in these fights when she's emotional. She has a lot of confidence about this, but it's not actually as true as she thinks it is. And my brain's not going, wait, what? I don't remember saying that at all. I could go back to the sanity journal and say, no, it didn't happen that way. You're okay. She doesn't remember the details that well. And I think one night we had talked about it, and I said, do you remember when we had these fights and you said this and this and this? I think I even brought out my sanity journal one night and said, do you remember saying this? Do you remember saying this? Do you remember saying this? And you're like, no, I have no recollection of that. Well, in a lot of my work with other couples, I've asked the same thing. And when the wives flip their lids, they don't remember what they said at all. Like they're just going strictly based on animal instinct in that moment, that defensiveness, that hurt, that fear, that whatever's coming out of their mouths, it's like they've dissociated. They're not in the present time and place. Yeah. And they don't remember that they said those things. And so the sanity journal was particularly helpful, basically trying to solve this giant problem of how do I fix this? And I got little nuggets of stuff from Kevin Samuels. I don't agree with some of the lifestyles that he talks about in his show, but some of the nuggets of just understand who you are as a man, what you are, what you bring to the table, what you provide, and start with that. You provide something really valuable to this woman. Recognize that. It belongs to you, and you are sharing it with this woman. Understand that. This isn't just something to like, okay, after you provide for us, after you put us in a nice house and the cars, then we'll start with the accounting. No. Those aren't the givens. That's some of the richness that you provide as a man. Recognize that. And I went, okay, yes. What do I provide? I provide a lot. Okay, so fair enough. I provide a lot, so I can ask for something. I can ask, I am justified in saying, it's not okay for you to talk to me that way. I provide you with this life, and I expect to be treated with respect in return. And so, but that felt like my soul was on fire and I was going to throw up. And because I distinctly remember various moments growing up and when we were engaged and at the beginning of marriage of men telling me, your job is to make her happy. And you are her Prince Charming. And getting threats from family members hither and thither saying, if you ever do anything to hurt her, I'm coming after you. And being told, if you ever have a disagreement, if you ever have an argument or a fight, find something to apologize for. So I apologize all the time. I apologize for, hey, I'm sorry I raised my voice. I'm sorry I could have said that better. I'm sorry I wasn't as gentle as I should be. I'm sorry And what I've observed, at least professionally, is that when a man does that, his wife starts to have contempt for him because I don't think that women are intentionally doing this, but I think that this is something that occurs is when a man apologizes for a fight, a woman marks it on the scoreboard of he's the cause of the problem. And I don't know that she's doing it on purpose. Maybe she is. But it seems to absolve a lot of women from any wrongdoing in the fight. So if he says, I'm sorry for raising my voice, she's like, see, you're the cause of the problem. You raised your voice again. And I think the other part is that they don't actually realize what they were saying and doing once they flip their lid. So they don't even have a recollection of it. But I found that apologizing, finding something to apologize for in our fights was not working. It seemed to be counterproductive. It seemed that I'd apologize and you say, I forgive you, but things never got better and oftentimes got worse in the long run. Not that same day necessarily.
Yeah.
There was still usually the ebb and flow of the relationship, but it wasn't getting any better and I was feeling worse. And so trying to figure out this problem and how to fix this and going, I need to apologize less. If I'll apologize if there was intentional malice or that was really clear this was wrong. You shouldn't have called her XYZ. You shouldn't have, whatever. If it was very clearly intentional malice or just extraordinarily repugnant behavior, then it needed to be apologized for. But if it was anger, if it was raising my voice, if it was getting upset, don't apologize for it anymore. And that was really hard because that was 37 years. This is my whole life of being told your job is to apologize if you have a disagreement, if she's upset, and your job is to make her happy. And so I was having to go against however many years, my entire life of training. And so it felt like my soul was on fire. It felt like I was betraying everything.
Yeah.
All Christian virtue, everything I ever learned about anything. I was convinced intellectually that I was on the right path, but I felt emotionally and was kind of scared that I was going straight to hell because I was breaking all those rules.
Yeah. I think, too, something that is important to remember when we talk about like conflict, and I think you may have mentioned this in in your first video that you've done on the podcast about what a woman like brings to the marriage. Like there's part of her upbringing or examples that she learned from family or her mother that come into the marriage. I think something that's important to remember and to not put a whole lot of stock into what is said during conflict when emotions are high. Yeah. Because you and I, both people come into a marriage already with wounds from their upbringing or past or events that happen in their lives.
Past relationships.
And that there's already wounds there. And that if we weren't given tools to learn how to recognize the woundedness that we have in ourselves, that those things, especially if you are in conflict with your spouse. And I think that conflict with your spouse is particularly painful because there's this expectation that they should be the person who gets you, that they get you. They should understand why you're in this state. They should understand. And so not putting a whole lot of stock, but I did this, but learning now that I shouldn't have, not putting a whole lot of stock into the wounds that I thought I acquired during our conflict.
Oh, yeah.
Because that tended to become the point of, like a point of resentment, like holding on to those things. Because even if I didn't remember details of events quite right, I very well understood my emotional state at that time. Do you know what I mean? But when the stakes are that high, it's hard to sort of keep everything clear, but just an understanding of, well, I know that I was hurt, or I know that I was angry, or I know that I felt betrayed. And then trying to work through those things in a productive way is hard, especially when you're just going off from just the intense emotions of an argument or a fight.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it is. Okay. Well, that was a fun topic so far. What else is popping into your head in this conversation? Because I know you and I have talked about how women don't have any resources for how to do this. Like, I had very few. I'm very solid in my Catholic faith. I read a lot about the Catholic faith, and then I listened to a bunch of guys who weren't Catholic because there weren't really any Catholic resources for how to do this, how to put your family back in right order. There's a lot of talk about putting your family back in right order, putting your marriage back in right order, but not the spoon feeding. Here's what you need to say. Here's how you need to identify what needs to be changed. Here's the order in which to do it. And you've talked a lot about how women don't have any resources for one, how to change on your own so you don't have to wait on your husband to do this. Mm-hmm. And then for two, if your husband is trying to do this, how to embrace that. So, like, what kind of advice would you give? What is helpful? I mean, there aren't any resources. So you're the resource. You're it. You're the resource.
So when I said it was hard for me to find resources, is I don't think the way that we live our life is very, I think it's very countercultural, in the sense of like, I believe that you are the authority of the home, that you're the head of the house. And if I were just to say, wives, just do what your husband asks of you, it's very unpopular.
Sure.
And so because it's so unpopular, I don't think that there are a lot of people out there who say, yeah, you should do what your husband asks of you. And here's how to do that in these particular situations. Because I think sometimes the particulars can kind of throw women off.
What kind?
So like if the husband is not being the spiritual leader, or he's being a bad leader of the home.
Like what? What's a not a good spiritual leader or a bad leader?
If he's not leading his family in prayer, he's not bringing them closer to God. If he is in the state of like really sort of like habitual sin that's grave. If he doesn't prioritize going to church, if he is not accepting his role as the leader to not just provide financially, but to provide spiritually for the family.
So what practically does a woman do? Like, those are the specific instances in which he is not leading the way she wants or the way he needs to. So what is a woman to do in those specific cases?
So I would say, as long as your husband's not asking you to do anything sinful, that you still do what he asks. So if he says, hey, could you have dinner ready by 5? That her response, like internally, should not be, yeah, when you start like leading the family in prayer.
Oh, yeah.
You know, sort of, because I think women can hold on to that, like, oh, you want me to do this, but you're not doing this thing, right? And so I think that there's like an internal resistance and rebellion there.
Yeah.
That just, if he asked you to do something that's within your role as his wife, then you should graciously submit to that. Again, as long as he's not inflicting like physical harm on you, or as long as he's not asking you to do something that is sinful.
Yeah.
If he's asking, hey, could you wake up early and have breakfast made for me? Sure, dear, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
And not with scorn. Like it's training your internal like the disposition of your heart to say, I want to serve him in the ways that are good and holy for my position as his wife. To care for him when he's sick, and to not be like, oh, you're such a baby when you have a man cold or whatever, you know, to not speak poorly about our husbands in a group of women, to speak with honor on the ways that he is fulfilling his role as husband and father, and to focus on those things and to praise those things in those areas where there might be a failing on his part, to bring that to God and ask, Lord, if your will, change his heart on this, change his behavior on this, because it's only really by his grace that we change.
Yeah.
And really learning to surrender that person to God. And knowing that God's going to do his work. And I read in this book, to trust in the slow work of God.
Yeah. Did you ever have a time where you prayed, God, will you change his heart in this? God, will you turn him in this? And the answer from God was no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Not yet. Or not yet. Like,
you're like, I'm not going to tell you yet because I'm still waiting for that to happen. Or if you don't want to go into that, that's not a problem either. Or what was that like for you, even if you don't want to talk specifically about the instance, what was that like for you to get that no answer or the not yet answer or the silence when you ask God, change his heart, help him to a different outcome, a different approach, a different whatever, and you didn't get a yes answer? What was that like for you, or what do you do with that? What do you do with that?
So, actually, there's a time when there were things that I was like, oh, this is kind of concerning. I don't know if I should bring it up. And so I was like, okay, Lord, if this is if this is totally fine, then change my heart. And if it's not, change his. Like in prudential judgments, like if you were doing something that was sinful, of course, as your wife, out of concern for your soul, I'd be like, out of love for you, that breaks God's law. And I need to tell you about this because I love you. Like, do it gently, do it peacefully, not in condemnation. But like when there's a prudential judgment or, and you're like, I wonder if you should be doing that. But there's something that I was like, I'm a little concerned about this. And so I brought it to God, and I was like, okay, is this, like, what should I do? And I just didn't know. Eventually, I think choices that were made just had natural consequences.
Woohoo! Natural consequences.
And I think that there was learning on that happened. And I didn't have to say anything. And I think God worked in that.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because it's kind of the same. I am not in any way comparing you to a child or like my children.
Sure.
But for lack of a better example, when our children are learning to walk, right? If we always held their hand and never let them make choices independently, if we're always like, oh, be careful, don't do that, then they don't grow or they don't progress in a way that they need to. So if you're always holding their hand, then they don't learn to walk by themselves.
Yeah.
And so there is an element, as a person who's in a relationship with anybody, your children, your husband, with friends or whatever, that there's an element where you have to allow them to walk their road, and to be there if they ask for your advice, to be there for offer support if it's in a way that you can support. And then, like there are lessons that can be learned through their own choices, and they're painful and it's hard. And it's actually hard to watch. And I think that there are some times like, oh, should I have said something? Would you have listened? Should I have said something sooner? Should I have voiced my concern to save him from?
You need to write a book called Proper Care and Feeding of Cholerics. Like,
well,
it kind of doesn't matter sometimes what you say. Choleric's going to go head first through the brick wall.
Yeah.
Even though everybody tells him, don't go head first through that brick wall, it's going to hurt. And he's like, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, that's some people. Some people in this room, and it's not you, and there's only two of us, have to do everything the hard way.
And I think that there's just lessons learned in that. And for me, like those things are hard, but I completely trust. I trust that you are a man after God's heart, that you are trying to do what you believe is best. And in prudential things, like you can make a choice that goes one way or the other. It's a choice of prudence, right? And I don't have insight to everything that you're thinking or experiencing as to why you make certain choices. But I think in those situations, like a wife needs to be there and support. And she can say, like after she brings it to prayer, to state your concern with as little emotion as possible. Like, this is not our case, but let's just say you decided to make an investment in something. And I was like, I'm not really sure if that's the best choice. Then I could say, I'm not really sure if that's the best choice. I would appreciate it if you brought it to prayer, and then I'll trust whatever you decide. If you have a good man, he's going to take that seriously. Like, I don't think any man wants to on purpose put his family in like financial jeopardy. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so I think you don't have to say, don't do this thing, it's super stupid, or like, don't be an idiot. Like, that's not a good way to voice a concern that you have. Yeah. But just, hey, have you considered this? Or, hey, you know what? Your friend over there, he seems really knowledgeable. Have you sought guidance from someone else? If not, I would encourage you to do so. And then you just have to let it go. Yeah. Like, I think she just has to let it go. And that's hard. And then if it does not work out, and if he suffers some painful consequences of those choices, that she needs to hold her tongue and not be like, told you so. Ooh. Or I knew this would happen. Yeah.
Have you ever had that temptation to say, I told you yes. so? Yeah, scale 0 to 10. How intense has that temptation been to say, I told you so?
10 and a half. 10 and a half. It's been up there.
Yeah. Let's go to 11.
Yeah, it's been up there.
Yeah. Did you do it?
No, I don't think so. I don't know how
I don't recall you doing it.
Yeah.
I don't recall you saying, I told you so about anything.
No, but there have been times I'm like, and I've wanted to say something like, see, I knew this wasn't going to end well, but whatever. And I think that many times women or wives or whatever just need to hold their tongue, because he is probably, if there are negative consequences because of his choices, he's already learned a lesson, a hard lesson. There's probably already shame or guilt or regret. And so piling more kindling to that fire is not helpful.
What do you do then when that happens? When he learns a lesson through natural consequences, and you're not going to be the one to say, I told you so, and you weren't the one to correct him. So what position do you take? What action do you take? What is your disposition, your mentality, your idea, your behavior at that point?
You smile. You give him a hug. Kiss him on the cheek. Can I get anything for you? There's no reason for a woman to be like mad. I mean, she can be mad, but it doesn't mean that you can not serve your spouse. Like
Yeah.
if he knows he screwed up, the last thing he wants or the last thing he needs is a grumpy face of someone who is like making it very visibly clear that she's unhappy. If I know it's something that you feel bad about, I try to do my best to soften the blow. Like if I know you're having a hard time with something, I don't know if I do a good job at this.
No, you do. Yeah, you do very well.
But yeah, to just smile and hey, I love you. And I tried to tell you either in like before, in, or after decisions that I tried to make it clear that I trust you, that I trust that you are going to do what you think God's calling you to. And so
It's a really interesting thing because we are different people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's both the experience of 19 years of marriage of I know you, and there's a lot of residual from past interactions, conflicts, whatever. There's still a lot of residual that kind of like floats up in some of those where you're like, I love you. Is there anything I can get for you? And part of it is I assume, and I don't know that I could even explain exactly what it is. I don't know if it seems arrogant to call it intuition. But there's part of me that goes, oh, she's thinking I told you so. But then another part of it is there's me with my own junk and stuff and ugly, my own guilt in having to learn the lesson in that difficult way, the shame of experiencing that, that maybe some of that is projected onto you. So I don't know. It's difficult to gauge. But there are times that when I do learn those lessons, and you are very much aware of what are those lessons that I have learned. And sometimes I'm going, I don't know. Is she thinking I told you so? And I think it probably is just mostly my shame that's kind of being projected onto you. I know that shame is going to pass. I know that guilt is going to pass. I know that every once in a while, when reminded of this lesson or that lesson, the shame is going to bubble up for a little while. And I know it's going to pass. So it's really not that big a deal. It's learning to integrate your emotions and allow them to be there. Kind of like the guy who wants to just, all he wants to do is come in through the front door, sit on your couch and put his muddy boots on your coffee table. And if you keep trying to fight him, he is an unstoppable force. So you're just going to expend tremendous amounts of energy trying to keep this guy out. And he will come through the wall, he'll come through the window, he'll come through the door. So the best thing to do is just let him open the door for him, let him come in, put his muddy boots up on your coffee table. And that's your emotions, the really uncomfortable emotions. And then he'll walk out after about 20 minutes and he'll leave without a fuss. And then you just clean off the coffee table. No big deal. But if you keep fighting it, it's going to get worse. Mm-hmm. So in learning to just let my emotions be, I think that's probably just the shame of learning that lesson and knowing that those tiny little voices inside of me are saying, you should stop now. You should stop. This is not going to work well. Are you even paying attention to what you're doing? This is like stupid. What are you doing? And then the big natural consequences come from whatever that mistake is. And it's painful and it reaches all the way up to a 9, but it doesn't ever boil over. But it's painful and going through that. And I come home and I experience that shame already just by virtue of I knew I probably shouldn't have made that decision in this situation or that. That really hurts. And there's no really good way around it. Or even sometimes it's I did what I thought was right in the moment and somebody had a fuss about it and they had more power than I did, so I lost. And that just losing, especially when it's unjust, hurts tremendously. You still have that experience of shame even when you're righteous in your actions. And I think that, so when I come home and I experience that and you ask me about it, you play the best possible hand by just saying, hey, how you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? There isn't anything better that you could do in that moment. Mm-hmm. And it's more one of those things I just have to go outside and chop wood or something, and throw rocks at the sky and kill squirrels or something to, eventually let those emotions run their course. Let the guy who's got his muddy boots on the coffee table get sick of sitting with his boots on my coffee table and decide to leave. So that's a really... But I think what you do of just saying those things, and you've never, since this whole big relationship change has occurred, I don't think you've ever let on well, how's that feel? Or I told you so, or you should have listened to me. Nothing like that at all. But at least for me, there is the tension in between us at that moment, probably just from my own shame that wants to be projected onto you as your disapproval.
And I think, sorry.
And so you do a great job with handling those situations, being married to a cleric, and just letting it pass and not rubbing my face in it or making me pay or letting me know your mind about it. Because you're right. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter what your mind about it is. The punishment was in the crime.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, and I think something that I think maybe you know or maybe don't, like if I disagree with something, but disagreement about a choice does not have to be equal to like dissent or rebellion or discord. Like disagreement doesn't have to lead to discord.
Sure. Disagreement is an intellectual state. It's you and I both think differently about a thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to, it does not have, there's no requirement of certain emotions to be experienced in that.
Right. And so I think just be like me understanding that, okay, well, I disagreed with that, but there's no reason that I need to mention it. It's said and done, things, whatever. And just because there's disagreement does not mean that there has to be an absence of my service as your wife. I think that would be unjust to you. In the same way, if you disagreed with me, like for you to be like, well, I'm not going to pay that bill, or I'm not going to work today so she doesn't have this, you wouldn't do that.
No.
And so I shouldn't do that either as a wife. That disagreement does not have to mean, but there's now a change in my behavior towards you as my spouse.
Yeah.
And, and I think I've gotten better. Like if I know that there's something that, is occupying your mental and emotional space, if you're like talking to me about it, sometimes I'm not sure what he wants me to do. So I'll ask, I was like, do you just want me to listen or do you want me to offer advice? And sometimes you're like, I just want you to listen. And I'm like, okay, just zip it. Keep the mouth shut. And then if you actually say, no, some advice, then I try to be very careful about the words that I choose to use.
Yeah. Usually
again,
when I say, I just want you to listen, I am in so fragile a spot that if you said anything, if you said anything that was even slightest bit negative, I'm just crushed because I'm already like, that's the last bit, and that would be the straw that broke the camel's back. Or if you said something that was the right thing, I'd just fall apart. Like I said, I'm really emotionally sensitive. Not really, but I'm more highly emotionally sensitive. But so I just go, I don't even know what's going to come out of your mouth, and I don't know how I'm going to handle it one way or the other, just because what I'm in already is so intense. I don't even know where this is going to go, and I don't want to get in that spot to try to solve another problem or go through another change in this particular moment.
Yeah. At one point in our marriage, this was a long time ago, we had been talking about something, and you had said, like, if your child gets sick, and like throws up on the couch. You're not going to be like, what are you doing? You know, you're not going to get mad at them for getting sick. You're going to like care for them. Like, are you okay? Let's get you into bed. Let me get you a washcloth or a bucket or whatever. Like, just take care of them in their need. And so, if your spouse makes a massive mistake or whatever, and they're experiencing sort of the sickness of those consequences, to not be like, well, don't know what you were thinking. You know, that's not helpful, but to look at them as someone who is like you would a child who is sick. You care for them in this state where they are feeling weak, or downtrodden, and to lift them up and to help them regain strength in that moment, you know? And then if conversations after that naturally flow about lessons learned and moving forward or getting past the effects of XYZ choice, then fine. But yeah, just like not being, like mad at a kid who's sick, but like helping them in that in the same way. If there is this sort of effect of a choice that's damaging or harmful, like to just have compassion, you know,
go into empathy first instead of your emotions, which might be anger or shock or frustration or disappointment. Yeah. Taking care of the one that's injured first. Yeah.
And you might be injured too. Like you might suffer consequences of those choices too, but but I'm called to, and I honestly believe this, like as a wife, I'm called to serve my husband.
Yeah.
And what are his needs? And that's what I'm called to do. Same thing like with my kids. If my kids are sick and I'm not feeling well, or I had a bad day, yes, their needs are going to come before mine because they need to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And I feel very strongly about that too, with my spouse. Now, sometimes I can still be like carrying heavy emotions with me. So I'm learning to be quiet in that. But you know, the silence is a really good lesson to learn.
It is. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I used to, so over the past 17 years, we were of the same mindset, not a good mindset, but we were supposed to be the same in our emotional experiences of things. And if I'm suffering, you better be in here too, because I'm really scared and suffering by myself. Or if you're suffering and I'm not, now I'm suffering because I'm scared. I don't know what you're feeling, and I got to solve this problem because I'm uncomfortable with you suffering. And so what you just seemed to explain was your priority being on serving me, serving the kids, and your emotions can be whatever they are in that particular moment. They don't have to be one of being upset or disappointed or angry, but they might be. But your focus is still on serving, and that silence is very important in that. And I've kind of experienced the same of where you would be upset, and if the only time that we had to talk about it was, or the only time that we were near each other was 11 o'clock at night when we're going to sleep, and I'd go, all right, what's going on? And then we were up till 1 or 2 in the morning arguing like stupid people. And learning that it's okay for you to be upset or angry or disappointed or whatever else you're feeling. It's okay for you to be a little more quiet and distant. And I don't have to do a dadgum thing about it. I can let you be in that space and say, yeah, okay, well, one day it'll get solved. And sometimes it's a couple of days. And letting you go through that struggle, because oftentimes I noticed that when I would say something, it would make your struggle worse. Because I'd say, what's going on? And then you'd say something, and if it had anything to do with me, or I took it as I'm being judged, then you had your original problem, and now you have the problem of me going That's not it at all. You're what? You're insane. You're crazy. You're acting crazy. You just call me crazy. No, I said you're acting crazy. And now you've got 3 problems because you had my feelings. And now we have this conflict about the thing that really shouldn't have been addressed in the first place and should just let you have your feelings and let you be upset. And I can continue on with my day happy or just content or just going back to work or going to sleep or whatever. But your emotional state doesn't have to dictate my emotional state. And so letting you be in that space, and you have more frequently organically come out of that emotional state and go, hey, I had a really tough time. I mean, you just did it this weekend. Hey, I had a really tough time this weekend. I didn't realize how much emotion I had about all of these different things going on in my life. Yeah. And now I'm out of it. I'm on the other side of it. And I kind of can look back and see, oh, wow, I had a lot more emotion this week than I thought I would because of these different events. Okay. And so you're able to organically come out of it by yourself. And I'm not mucking around in there trying to fix it because of my own insecurities. Yeah. I can let you be in that space. And that seems like a much healthier experience for you because I'm not tinkering with it for my own selfish reasons. I'm letting you be there. And so I can continue my life and you can go through your stuff and come out on the other side just naturally.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to keep it in its proper order. I don't know if you said this phrase. You may have said this phrase and it stuck with me.
If it was brilliant, it was probably me.
It was probably you. But having custody of your emotions.
That was me.
You're brilliant.
It's brilliant.
And I was like, oh. So when you said that, I was like, I need to do more of that. So, like being able to be like, whoa, that emotion's kind of running big. You need to bridle that. Where is it coming from? Why are you feeling it so strongly? But just trying to really have custody of my emotions. And so I'm just trying, and it is a work in progress, but I'm trying to keep my emotions in its proper order.
Tell me what that means. You use the words, to bridle it and custody of it and keep it in proper order. What, practically speaking, spoon feed? What is that? What are you doing there?
Let's say, for example,
are you stuffing them down? Are you putting them in a bottle on the shelf and never dealing with them again? Are you ignoring them, denying them? What are you doing? What is that?
So for me, what I have found most helpful is bringing them to Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
I literally have to sometimes visualize me like writing whatever emotion I'm feeling like on a piece of paper.
Okay.
And then like giving it to Jesus, like putting it in his hand or placing it in the image of the Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
And so what I guess the goal in doing that is, which of these emotions or like what I'm experiencing, is it coming from a truthful, honest, real place and something that needs to be addressed? Or am I just kind of letting this run amok? Yeah. So that's what I mean by like custody of my emotions,
keeping track of them and not letting them just run all over the place.
Right. Yeah. So in this situation with the breakup, it went from the dishes to the lemons to the flowers to the ballet to the whatever.
Yeah.
So when I let it snowball like that, it is never beneficial to me, nor to you, nor to anyone who is in the vicinity, like around me, because it wrecks my peace. It destroys and takes the peace, the patience that I have, and the energy to deal with what I need to deal with that day. And so just making sure that those things don't run amok.
Yeah.
And so keeping it in its proper order, like, am I addressing these things with God first before I address them with you? And sometimes I do that well, and sometimes I don't. And sometimes I bring it to prayer more, and sometimes I'm like so emotional that I forget to bring it to prayer, or like I just get really upset about whatever. And I have to remind myself, okay, the proper order, address these with the Lord first, and then He'll give you clarity on if this is something that needs to be pursued and addressed with your spouse, your children, your mother, your sibling, whatever relationship is where there's like strong emotion there. So just like trying to keep that in check and bringing it to the Lord first.
Yeah. What's another way? So maybe somebody who doesn't have a devotion to the Sacred Heart, which would be a great thing to have. But let's say that option is off the table just because that's too many steps before they get to the custody of the emotions part.
Sure.
What's another way that somebody could, without necessarily having a devotion to the Sacred Heart, what's another way that they could exercise that custody of their emotions?
I would say to name it. What are you feeling? Are you angry? Are you disappointed? Are you hurt? Or is there grief? Is there sadness? Like, what is it? Try to get as close to the true emotion that you're experiencing. And then, okay, is my response to that? What is my response? How am I responding to this thing that I'm feeling? Like if it's anger, am I yelling? Am I throwing things? Am I using language I shouldn't? Are my eyes bulging out of my head? Like whatever. Like what is it? Like how am I exhibiting this emotion like in my body? And then sort of checking that like, okay, is that what I should be doing? Is there something else? Is there another layer there? Am I really upset about the dishes, or do I feel unseen? Right? Because if it's just the dishes, but I still feel unseen, then the next thing is still going to open up this thing down here.
Yeah.
So just trying to figure out what exactly, like even journaling, write it down. What am I feeling? Am I angry? Am I disappointed? Am I frustrated? And why? Like, what is the real source of why I'm feeling this way?
Yeah.
Is it really about the dishes? Is
And
it
like
really
you
about
said
the lemons?
earlier, if you feel unseen, that doesn't mean that it's the other person's job to fix that problem.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I thought that had to be the case for a long time. Like being empathetic, that's seeing how I'm feeling and empathizing and making how I'm feeling and how important I think it is that your energy has to match the importance that I think.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And that's
Sure.
not the case, you know? 'Cause like I said, a whole array of things that happen in our life can make this one experience far more intense. And someone who hasn't had previous life experience maybe will never understand the intensity that you're feeling in this particular moment because of this event. And so, yeah, just being okay with, you know what? No one's really going to understand. No one's really going to understand in the entirety that I want them to how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And having to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Accepting, like I tell the kids, accepting a no answer. If there's something that you really want and your parents say no, then accepting a no answer means that you drop the subject.
Yeah.
You accept the no, and then you have to drop the subject. But I think sometimes in our emotional state, whether it's not fixed or the response from the other people that we want is not there, that we don't accept that no answer, right? That we either brood on it or resent, or like we build up resentment, or we keep thinking about what should be done differently. Sometimes you just have to drop the subject.
Yeah.
Accept the no answer, accept that this wasn't the response that you had hoped for. And it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And realizing that it is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And just let it go. But you really have to let it go. You can't keep it down here for it to resurface later.
What does that mean? Let it go. How does someone let it go? Because a lot of people really don't. Like some people understand what that means. They understand. Oh, just let it go. And a lot of people don't understand how to let it go. What steps would they take in order to let something go?
Well, I would say, practically speaking, if that particular like thought or whatever you experience emotionally because of some event, that if that comes back up into your mind, be like, nope, I'm not entertaining that. I'm not going to entertain that. I'm not going to go there again, whatever.
So kind of having custody of the mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Like pushing that thought away and saying, no, we're not thinking about that anymore.
If it's something, I suppose, that is resurfacing, if there's someone that you can talk to and trust, be like, hey, this thing I can't let it go. Because maybe there is something to it. Maybe there is some resolution that has to happen. So I'm not saying that there may not be, in particular cases, an instance where there might need to be some further communication about something. But if it's just like, yeah, I'm really mad about that. And I'm going to talk to my friend about how I'm mad about that. And then I'm going to talk to this other friend about how I'm mad about that. To just keep talking about the emotion instead of, okay, what did I learn from that experience and how can I grow? What if this happens again? Will I respond the same way or differently?
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of thoughts that you can entertain, but not just brooding, okay,
What's brooding?
Just keep thinking about how mad you are about whatever, or how sad you are about that thing. And just having like that's the nest that you're choosing to just sit in. Like, I'm just going to sit in my nest of anger. And so you're just sitting in it. You're not processing through it. You're not taking steps to actively name the emotion, process it, move through it. You're just going to just be mad.
Moving through it, you mean just letting yourself feel it and letting it move on if it wants to.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So we've come full circle in our conversation where we talked about having custody emotions, what that feels like to have those strong emotions, and now all the way back to not letting yourself brood, not holding on to those emotions. Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on before we finish for tonight?
I don't think so. We actually covered a lot more than I thought we would.
We covered a lot.
We've gone lots of places, but
quite a bit.
Yeah, right now I don't. But if the ever questions arise, I'm happy to join you again. This was fun.
Okay, it was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me. Thanks for doing
Thanks
this.
for having me.
Thanks for being on the Based Marriage Podcast, a production of Good Enough Studios. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, it was.
I enjoyed
fun.
it. We should do this again sometime.
I agree.
How would I get a hold of you if you wanted to come back on the show?
Maybe I'll give you my number after.
Maybe. Maybe you will. You have a number? I heard your husband was shutting off your cell phone after tonight.
I'll pass it to you after we close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.